Welcome back, folks. So obviously, this is our new teaching series. It's a 4-part series. And it's probably going to be not the type of series that you were expecting. It's probably not going to be a riveting series where it gets you excited or quickly back into the charts looking for specific patterns that I teach. This is kind of more or less along the lines that you've already studied and you've adopted this model that I've provided for free on 2022 ICT Mentorship on the YouTube channel. And now that you have that model and you're growing in your understanding with it, I want to provide the community a more practical approach to using the information. When I came up, I had lots of books, a lot of authors and teachers and lecturers that would say, this is how you go into the marketplace and find setups. This is how you go in and you look for patterns to profit. And yes, the books provided a lot of insight. It gave me things to look for, but it didn't really give me a roadmap or blueprint to attack the real root problems that I had, which brought me to trading in the beginning. And that's kind of like what this series is going to open up with. And I'm going to hopefully walk you through a transitional state of mind from thinking like everybody does when they first come into this industry, and hopefully align you properly so that way you'll have the best advantage to use the information I provided in this mentorship this year. This series is ends. All right, so here's an overview real quick. So I know some of you are going to be excited to know where we go, what do we do, what's going to be covered. There's going to be a 4-part series. And the first in the series is obviously this episode here. And we're going to tackle the problem. And the problem is ends need to be met. I want to teach you how to look past the image lifestyle. And that's always been my approach as a mentor. I have seen many people in this industry well before me, and still today, even more so today, they dangle the carrot of affluence, fast cars, luxury lifestyle. And unfortunately, that's what caught me up in the beginning and caused me to stumble. But I want you to understand that the problem of making ends meet, that's not an impossible task. So I want you to understand that problem everybody has. I have ends that must be met every single month too. Maybe not to the degree of stress-inducing ends like most of you in the world, but I had that stuff too. I have children, and this series is aimed at one of my older sons because I want him to have this approach going forward, thinking about how he needs to make his ends meet. Episode 2 is going to be the solution. And the idea is obviously to secure an additional income source. And I'm going to cover how you need to be approaching your life as a business and running your life as a business. And understanding that the task of making ends meet may feel impossible at times. You got to change that state of mind to I'm possible. That means you as the student, you as the operator with this information, you're possible. It's possible for you to succeed. It's possible for you to change the direction of your life. It's possible for that to happen. If you don't believe that, then all the things that you've learned either from me or other people are not going to help you. You have to have that state of mind, that transitional state of mind from understanding there's a problem, there's ends to be met. Then there's a solution I'm going to provide for you. But then you have to understand that that solution is possible for you. Episode 3. The plan. I'm going to teach you how to go in and determine the starting point for you. Everybody's different. Everybody has this content in their hands now, but they're all going to do something differently with it. So what is it that you're going to be doing differently from the next guy or gal? I'm going to cover that in episode 3. But I'm going to teach you how to specifically attack one financial end. One thing that has to be overcome each month for you. Because that's the thing that's plaguing you. It's causing you to do things that is derailing your progress. And it's also focusing on casting forth a vision. You have to be able to see where you're going. Where's your objective? Where's your goal? Whatever that is going to be unique for you. Not all of us have the same goals or aspirations, but you have to have something and begin there. And finally, I'll close the series out with episode 4, the process. Making ends meet. Putting it into action. What is it you're specifically going to go into the charts looking for? What's your routine? What's the daily routine? Your weekly routine? What do you do when you find an obstacle? When you're met with drawdown? How do you overcome that? So that way you can pursue the goal and overtake it. The problem. In this episode, I want you to think about what it is that you feel pressured about. That means you have to focus in on what is the catalyst that makes your decisions. What causes you to do things? Well, you have bills. So that means you get out of bed, you get prepared for work, and you take your hindsight there and you do what you have to do to get that money. That money, that's your income. Now, whether you have a business or if you're employed, that's your income. That is the only source of money that you have to work with every single month. Now, unless you have additional income streams, that's it. So each month you have ends to meet. In the United States, we have an expression, ends. Ends are bills. Okay, so the expression is, man, I have to make ends meet. I have to make my bills this month. Okay, and most time it is more weeks in the month with bills attached to them than there is weeks with additional surplus income. So when you have that problem, and it's not limited to those individuals in the United States, income is your only working resource. So unless you increase that income, that's the only source to draw from to make ends meet. The living expenses that you have to spend from that income many times are not really well thought out. And then past those living expenses, you have lifestyle. Some individuals in the United States, and probably in other countries too, but in the US, we are the country of excess. And many times we'll have income and then we'll live above our income and try to put on a facade and live a specific lifestyle that really isn't conducive for us to be, well, financially successful. So the lifestyle being placed over top of the living expense is number one problem in the United States. That also is the number one problem in the trading industry, because the lifestyle, that's the image, that's the thing that everyone gets caught up in. You have not seen me do those things. And I do that for a reason, because I want to be practical. I want to be able to sit down with the students or those individuals that want to spend time with me and incline their ear to what it is I'm teaching. I want them to understand that there is a way to do this and not trying to be, well, over the top. Now, can you build wealth in trading? Absolutely. But nobody starts there. And the problem with this industry, educators, mentors, influencers, many times they push the image of wealth right away, real quick. And that is very intoxicating to someone that is in a state of mind that they have to make ends meet. It's more practical for you to understand that that income source has to be increased. And there's all kinds of business opportunities and scams and things that out there that will try to lure your attention and money to do these things to hopefully increase your income. My job is to show you how to do this, and it costs you nothing. It's going to be an investment in time and effort, but this series is a transitional series where it helps you take what you've learned so far in the mentorship and apply it to your real life. Not your social media life where you're pretending to be somebody you're not. If you're doing that, stop. This is your wake-up call for that. This is the reality check. You can waste time pretending to be something that you're not and never really arrive at what you started the whole journey for. What are your ends? This is the part where it's uncomfortable, and you'd be surprised how many people, especially Americans, and my daughter is guilty of this. Okay. So I raised this woman, and she still is not very good with managing her finances. And admittedly, dad has to come sometimes to the rescue. I'm not proud of that. It is a work in progress with her, but I'm not exempt from all the things that you as parents, as employees of average Joe or average Jane, those things that you're dealing with, I deal with in other ways, and I've dealt with them too before I became who I am today. But you have to sit down and go through what it is that your life costs each month. That means you have to come up with a budget, figure out what it is that you're having to spend each month. Is there things that you have to reconsider whether you should be paying that every month? Because if you have excess expenses that you really don't need, that is a stress. And those things are going to have an impact on your trading. They're going to make you want to do things that you otherwise wouldn't feel inclined to do or pressured to do because that end isn't there dangling that needs to be met. So you have to do what? You have to write down the things that you have to spend each month and then determine what it is that's really required versus excess. Income to monthly expenses. Obviously, on the left-hand side, this is our income. Whether it comes through a business that you're running, whether it's a successful business or barely profitable, a startup, that income has to be counted, obviously, and or your job or employment income. That's it. That's your working source. So out of that, the ends that have to be met, top of the list most times is mortgage payments for your home or a rent payment. Then transportation. That's usually an automobile or automobiles with insurance and gas premiums. Utilities. What keeps the lights burning in your home? What heats your dwelling place? What cools it down in the summertime? Those are expenses that are going to be static. I have to pay them. Having an affluent income source doesn't exempt me from having utilities. It doesn't exempt me from transportation. In fact, I have a larger transportation expense than the average person because I have lots of vehicles and I own more vehicles than I really technically need, but I'm a car person. So these costs, these are the top three. Everybody's going to have this in some degree. Now, while I don't have a mortgage on properties, I don't have rent on dwelling places, I do have property taxes. They have to be met. So that's an end I have to meet every single year. Or Uncle Sam says, we're going to take the place that you own. If you don't pay the government its rent and taxes, your things don't belong to you anymore, and they seize it, which doesn't really make any sense when you think about it, does it? Ownership is an illusion, folks. So after we get through these top three, then you have the expense, which is really concerning these days, healthcare. It's supposed to be affordable, but it doesn't seem like it's so affordable anymore, does it? And this one recently has become really expensive, and it's probably going to get even more expensive. So right here, this is the majority of where most of your money's probably going, if you are sound about not being excessive in lifestyle. For those of you who are parents, childcare, daycare expenses, diapers, formula, doctor visits, clothing for the child that has to continuously be updated because they're growing, that's an expense. That's very stressful. This specific end is very emotionally driven, and it'll cause you to do things that if you didn't have a child, you wouldn't do. This also, many times, is the very end that makes the women traders do better than men, because they know they have to make sure their children eat. They have to make sure that the lights are still burning, the heat's still on, and they have food in their bellies. That's what separates the women and men. In my opinion, learning how to be a mentor over the last 30 years, my students have taught me that the women are better in discerning risk because they know that they have that nesting trait about them. You know how it is, gentlemen, if you ever had a spouse or significant other that you impregnated and you're bringing a child into the world, when they get pregnant, they have this amazing transformation where they're nesting. They start doing things, and it drives you nuts and drove me nuts because I was like, why is she doing all these things? Like, she feels like you got to have it done right now. It's 9 months. No. When a woman's pregnant, it's right now, and yesterday was too late. So those impulses for a woman are going to be much more impactful for decision making, and that makes them a better money manager than a man. Clothing, obviously, in today's world, everybody wants to wear the finest threads, the newest brands, the high-end luxury tags, all those things. That's an expense. And then finally, this is where everybody messes it up in the youth. They want the entertainment. They want to be the life of the party. They want to stand out amongst everyone in the crowd. And they're going to put more money into that entertainment category every single month. And that's why these young guys in trading, they're really not going to do very well, because they're pouring everything into that. The club lifestyle, flash, pomp, image, look at me, all those types of things. It's extremely expensive to do those things. And many times the young guys in this industry waste more money in that entertainment and clothing. Those bottom two categories are the ones that most of the money is being spent on, even if they're profitable. And they are not becoming affluent. They're not becoming wealthy. They're just being a slave to image. And that's why I teach the way I do. I want you to understand that I was a victim of that when I was younger. I spent stupid amounts of money doing those two bottom categories. Didn't own a home, but I had a real nice car, and I took everybody out and I paid for everything, and I could buy anything in a store or buy anything that I wanted. But I didn't think about securing a home and being financially secure and stable, and then having fun doing those other things. So I was the definition of new money. 20 years old, making a stupid amount of money, thinking I knew everything and I could rule the world. These things that we have listed here, you need to figure out what those expenses are for you and trim off the fat, the things that you don't really need. Because if I've bored you so far in this episode, I want you to understand that whether you realize it or not, this list here on the right-hand side, there's something in that list that's causing you to stumble in your learning and in your trading. It's in this list. You have to meet this need, whether it be financially because it's inescapable, like rent or mortgage or property taxes, or transportation costs. Everybody has to get somewhere. How are you getting there? Not everybody owns a car. They still have public transportation. That's an expense. It may not become a very large expense in that capacity, but it's still an expense. So transportation for those individuals that don't have personal vehicles, that falls lower in the category list here, but it's still an expense. You can't escape it, right? Everybody has to get from one place to the next, point A to point B, whether it's for a job, whether it's for entertainment, for groceries. It's something you can't escape. But something in this list is driving you to make irrational decisions as a developing student or trader, impulsively. And for the men, it's usually those two bottom categories. They're throwing things at image when they don't own a home yet without a mortgage. They don't have car notes paid off. They're spending too much on cars, image, and entertainment because they're trying to draw attention to themselves, because they're not really there yet. They're faking it until they make it. And that is an extremely huge draw on success arriving when it should have. You're delaying that. You're deferring that. And you're really holding yourself back by doing those types of things. All the things you see out there, they're nice. I've had just about everything you can imagine. But I can tell you what I love most is the peace of mind and the financial solitude that I have because I've done things like I'm teaching you in this series. I did personal reflections. I looked at where I blew money and wasted money, and also focused in on what it was that I was doing that caused me to take trades when I really shouldn't have been taking them. See, I give sound advice in terms of trading. I give sound logic about why the markets are going to move. I've given you a model that's absolutely beautiful. It's consistent. You've tasted that now. You're seeing it. People are making real money. They're getting funded. They're making their own accounts grow. I'm not telling them what trades to get into. So what are they doing that maybe you aren't doing? Well, they probably mastered this list over here. They're not being impulsive or reckless because they have an end problem they're trying to overcome with flash in the pan windfall victories. They're not trying to do those types of things. They're not trying to double their account every month. They're not trying to double their account every 3 months. They're just trying to make ends meet and growing from there. So that list is going to materialize in this. This right here is going to be the battlefield. You're bringing all of that to this chart or whatever chart you're looking at. And it's going to cause you to put things in motion that's going to cause you to have stress, uncertainty, fear, anxiety, because you need what? You need an escape. You need to be able to get out of that rut that you're in. Everybody's in a rut. Everybody has a rut. I have expenses because I have a lot of big things, big ticket items, and that costs money to keep them, to maintain them. So having lots of money doesn't remove having financial obligations and problems. I have ends just like anybody else. You are not going to escape the rut problem. The rat race you can leave. That takes time. But you cannot allow the ends that you have to meet every single month to plague your decision making when it comes to trading. Because when you look at the market, you're going to be thinking, oh, I got to get out of this house. I have a baby on the way. We don't have enough room. That might be an impulsive feeling that a woman may have. Nesting. They may feel pressured to tell their husband or spouse, hey, we got to make a change here. And they feel inspired to go into the marketplace and say, okay, if I could just make 50% on my account this month and maybe do 25% the first week of that next week here, I'll have enough money to do this or that. And it's usually the men saying, well, I don't feel like I'm significant enough because the job I'm working, they don't appreciate me. My wife isn't really impressed with me recently and it's grown stale. So if I spice up my relationship with this, I feel like I'm significant and I need to feel like I'm escaping that rut of just making the bills and not having any excitement or any success in life. This is it. I got a good job. I got a mortgage. I got to pick a fence. I got a dog. This is life. This is the American dream. Then you realize that you're paying sometimes 2 to 3 times more than the house because you're carrying a mortgage, which means basically it's a death note in Latin. That's what mortgage means. So that's not an American dream. That's an American lie. So you want to be able to get a home and pay it off. That's what you want. That's what you want. Now, we're not taught this in school. We're not taught how to be a business owner. We're taught to be good working slaves and be thankful that we have a good job. Jobs are required in the beginning. I had lots of them, but jobs are not the answer. Ends must meet, but you can't take the fear and uncertainty about your ends into the marketplace. You have to disconnect from that. So when you put a trade on, you're not looking at, I have to make all my bills by this time, versus what is the least of your expenses? So when you make your list, what's the smallest expense that you have to have that you can't trim away as fat? I'm not talking about like Netflix. I'm not talking about Amazon Prime. I'm talking about what is the least expense that you have to meet every single month. Whatever that is, that's the one you go in looking to trade for the entire month. Your goal is to meet that end. So if it's $300, you go in, you spread that $300 across 4 weeks. And then you figure out how much do you have to do to get that $300. It's going to sound silly to most of you, especially the young guys. Oh, this is boring. I mean, I can make so much. I've done so many things in a demo account. But how have you done that in a live account? It's a different world, folks. So how do you get good at trading $500 per tick in Forex? How do you get good at $2,000 a handle in S&P futures? You don't do it by having more money in a funded account. Just because you have the margin to be able to do those types of things doesn't mean that you have the wherewithal and the psychological makeup that has been developed over time doing very little trade, very little margin, very little leverage over time. So you have to condition yourself for that. Nobody just simply learns how to do a simple pattern or approach to trading and goes out there and kills it monetarily, because you have no idea what that impulsive nature feels like when you do a heavily leveraged trade and you make that money. It's a scary and exciting feeling. But then what happens is you have that losing trade because you want to have that fix again. Everybody starts out in this industry the same way. They want to get out of that pressure of stress. They can't make their bills. They can't make their ends meet. But you cannot bring that to trading. You can't. Now, how do you do it soberly? You take the least amount of money in terms of an end or expense each month and make that your target for the month. And you do that for a few months. You're telling me I got to trade and just try to make $300 for the month? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And then once you do that, then it's okay. What's the next expense that I can add to it? And you start doing that over time. And you transition from learning a model, which is what you've been doing this year. You all know the model right now. You're still practicing. Maybe you're back testing, maybe you're forward testing. But now some of you are at the stage where, what is it that I'm supposed to be doing with this information? Because I'm ready to start trading with real funds, because you determined that, not because I said you should do it, but you decided that's what you want to do. How do you do it? This is what you do. You go in with this type of target. And if you've been very successful and consistent, maybe it's a matter of picking 3 or 4 of the lowest cost, expense, or end for each month and make that your target goal. The ideal scenario is for you to aim for that top of the list. Mortgage, rent, those top 3 things, 4 things. And if you can cover 50% of that, folks, listen, that is a huge weight off of anyone's back. You won't feel suffocated or strangled anymore. And eventually you want to replace the costs of those top 4 things in that list. And over time, completely cover every single month's ends. And then once you can do that consistently, try to aim for doubling that. Once you get to the point where you can double that and you're consistently doing it, then and only then, if you're properly funded, what does that mean? About $100,000. $100,000 or more. Then I think trading for a living is probably considered. But anything prior to that, you're not ready. I guarantee you, you are not ready. And if you want to challenge me with that idea, come back to me in a year and tell me you did it and prove it. Because I'm going to tell you right now, that won't happen. It won't happen, because you will wreck yourself. You'll do things stupidly. You'll be impulsive, and ends will catch up with you in the negative aspects. They'll cause you to do things irrationally in these markets, and you don't want to do that. You don't really realize it. Maybe you're probably thinking to yourself, wow, I never really considered this, but this is exactly what's the problem. The root cause that everyone wrecking themselves in these markets is because the money is not enough in their personal life. Think about it. That's why this country and every other country around the world, they have medication in the form of alcohol and drugs. Those self-medicating rituals that people put themselves through, that's an escape mechanism. Well, these markets are no different than that. There's no difference between these markets for a new trader that had that impulsive desire to escape the stress and pain of their real life. They go in, they self-medicate, and they put a trade on because it feels good. Because if it wins, what's that going to do? It's going to cause them to feel that this is the right thing to do, and it felt great for the moment, and that wears off fast. You don't have a headache like a hangover. You don't have withdrawals like with drugs. You have impulsive, chasing, pursuing characteristics that make you want to go back in right away, like it's going to happen to you again in the next 10 minutes. And you want that hit of dopamine, that feel good, I'm doing the right thing. And this is proof that I can escape the rat race faster than anybody else says I can. And that's a trap. That's a pitfall. And I went through that multiple times. and I blew accounts multiple times. It never happens like that, folks. And I know some of you, if you're young and you're male, you're hearing this and you're saying, oh yeah, watch me. I'm going to be the one. I'm telling you, if there was anybody on the planet that was ever going to do it, it would have been me, because I was literally giving everything up. Friends, family, everything was poured into this, and I still could not do it, because that emotional and psychological impact of having pressure of the real world, making ends meet, those bills, not having enough, that feeling of not having enough, or maybe just not having enough, that's going to force you to do decisions in these charts that are not rational. You're going to abandon the rules. You're going to over leverage. You're going to enter before you should, and or not stick with the model and hold for your profit objectives. Because what? Ends. Not specifically because you're going in and trying to make those ends meet, because you probably never sit down and think, this is how much money my expenses are each month. If I could just go in and take a piece of that from trading, that's progress. Contrast that with, here's this course I'm teaching you, or watch my videos, or buy my course, or come to my workshop and learn how to make 50R, 20R. How does that equate to your ends? These individuals don't know how to make money. They're not making money. I promise you they're not. Because if they did, they would be proving it. And they don't. All I'm trying to do here is be a voice of reason and give you practical ideas how to apply what it is that I've taught you. Because you could still go out there and hurt yourself financially if you don't watch what it is that I'm teaching you here. And guard your mind. Guard it, because it's easy to sit in a demo account and think, well, I don't need to be at my job 6 months from now because I learned this skill set. And you have no idea what it feels like to be trading with a $10,000 account and watch it grow to a $50,000 account and then trade from a $50,000 to $100,000 equity. That's a growing stage that none of you, if you've never done it, understand what that feels like. And the leverage of putting on large positions versus what you start with. See, most of you are probably looking at these funded account companies out there and thinking, okay, it's only a couple $100 to get that if I pass the challenge, and you just blow it because you're doing what I'm teaching you not to do in this series. You're playing the lottery. So who's the real fool here? Is it the people that work all week and they pour their money into, like tonight, there's a big game out there that's $1 billion. The lottery. Mega Millions. Okay? There's people out there that work all week long and they pour money into that kind of stuff. I don't do those things. I don't think that that's a practical approach to using your money wisely. But there's people that do that. Who is more of a fool? Someone that goes out and spends $10 or $50 a month in lottery, or the people that think, I'll save up, put up enough money to get these funded account challenges, a couple $100 here, $600 there, $500, whatever it is. I don't even know. But whatever that is, and you're going in there and you're rolling the dice. Not really doing what it is that you should be doing, thinking soberly about the risk, making sure that you're trying to do everything you can to protect your access to that funded account. That prop firm has rules that you have to stick to. If you don't stick to those rules, what happens? You no longer have access to that account. Now, you can argue and say, well, you don't really have that money. Well, I'll tell you what. What happens when a student does these things and they get withdrawals and checks that now they're spending the money? That kind of cancels out any argument whether they have really a $100,000 account or a $50,000 account or a $400,000 account. I'm not here to argue that. That to me is irrelevant. The people that are doing it and getting money from these companies, they're going to be the counterparty to the argument that you really don't have that money. You think these people care whether you think that they have that money or not when they're having checks and withdrawals and that's money that they're actually spending and they have access to? Nobody cares what everybody else is thinking when you're doing it. So I want you to go through your personal finances. I want you to be diligent about writing down everything that you spend and how much money you have coming in. Now, you may have a job like a waitress or a waiter, and you do tips. That's going to be a variable amount. When I used to deliver pizza, and many of you probably don't know this, that are new, but I worked as a pizza delivery guy in the late 80s and early 90s. I managed a Domino's. Those were real jobs that I did. So I came up from that. If you've done things like that, you know that there isn't really any consistent number of what it is you're making because tips are tips. They're variable. Just get a baseline low end. And then anything above that is just a bonus. Okay. But you got to write down what it is that you're having to spend each month and remove those things that you don't need right now. You're not going to miss Netflix. I'm sure you probably have a friend that would lend you access to it. And I'm not saying cheat them, but you know how it is. I know that stuff goes on just like you do. Those things can be trimmed off. Okay. Besides, how much time are you pouring into other things that are not going to build you up? If you chose this path for your life, this needs to be second in line next to your family. So it's family and then this, because this is going to require a lot of time learning. It's going to require a lot of energy and effort, and it's going to be a very, very cruel lover. If you do not give it its time that it demands, it will not yield the love and tenderness that you're hoping it will. So hopefully this has been inspiring to you to think about what it is that you're doing and maybe have done to yourself. And I'll be back with you in episode 2 to help you conquer making ends meet.